The Blue Chip Sports Network presents Get in the Game with Eric, Brian, Reggie, and Jordan on iTunes, the Blue Chip Broadcasting YouTube channel, and BlueChipBroadcasting.com.
Welcome to another edition of Get in the Game. It's episode 82, very special edition of our podcast, one that all of us at Blue Chip Broadcasting are very excited about, and it's about time we've done this. The entire gang is here with us tonight, and then some. We have got a cast of thousands tonight, okay, or seven, whichever. Let's start with my partner, Brian Nelson. Brian, welcome tonight. How you feeling?
Good evening, Eric. Excited to do a lot of listening. I think this will be one of the rare times that you and I do not get the most words in.
Let's hope that's the case. The podcast is much better for it. Reggie, the professor, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. All things considered. You know, this is a really this is what's going on in our country right now is something that has needed to happen for a long time, and so I'm really excited tonight to learn, just like you guys are, to listen, to have open dialogue, and to find out, just some things to hear some things that we all have needed to hear for a long time. So
should be good. Jordan Santa Maria, the kid, glad to see
Eric,
you.
What's going on, man? Super excited. Glad to see, Ro Dunham, my guys on here. Caprina, there we go with the reactions. Caprina was a fellow athlete.
Obviously, we'll be able to tell who's involved in college because they do all the fancy technical stuff.
There we go.
But what we wanted to do tonight is take a step back. There's some things going on in our country that are heartbreaking, quite frankly, and that point out how naive and little I personally know. So we wanted to bring on some very special people. We are very fortunate that we have the people joining us today that we have grown to love. And for some of them, it was hard. Wayman, it was hard. I'm sorry, man.
We appreciate the kind words on us being special.
We have with us tonight, we have Wayman Strickland. Wayman Strickland is the women's basketball coach at the California State University of Stanislaus in Turlock. Wayman, welcome. We are glad to have you aboard tonight.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. As you said earlier, the state of things in our country and our world right now is very unique. It's never happened before with a pandemic, with everyone being kind of quarantined in our country, and then the social kind of strife that our country is being placed in right now. And it's just my hope through conversations like this, from this podcast, and just personal conversations just taking place all over this country and world, that we can make this place a better world for all of us. And I appreciate you using your platform to have this tough conversation and shed light on it, just with the relationships that you've grown with each of us that are here tonight. And hopefully we can just start something. And I think one thing we talked about earlier was like having it not just be a moment, but a movement. So hopefully we can have this be just one of the small moments of continuing this movement to make our country and this world a better place for all.
And I will tell you from my point of view, and Wayman would never say this, but both Brian and I have gone through a couple of difficult circumstances here over the course of the past year. And Wayman has been so supportive, and he has had our backs each step of the way. And the respect that he has garnered as a man from both Brian and I is exceptional. He is just an outstanding man. And I am fortunate to know him. The next guest that we have is somebody who we have watched play play basketball on Wayman's squad for 5 years. She is probably, Brian, you jump in here, but probably one of the most intelligent individuals for her age that I have ever had the privilege of coming across.
Yeah, she is a very special, unique individual. Somebody that I've had the privilege of having just side conversations. I don't know if Caprina remembers, I ran into her on campus. So this is probably, Caprina, 3-4 years ago. Yeah, and we just chatted for about 20 minutes. Poor girl could not wait to get away from me. But I learned so much from her just talking with her. Not only one of the most intelligent people, Eric, but I would say, and Wayman I'm sure could agree with me on this, one of the kindest and most genuine quality character individuals that we've had the pleasure of meeting in our time doing what we've been doing over at the university. And we've met a lot of great people. But Caprina is very special young lady. Been blessed with tremendous talent, both athletically, as we've had the privilege to watch, as well as academically. And we're excited about the things that she's going to be doing in her career moving forward, and really excited about that. So Caprina, thank you so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. And I'm actually really excited to have this conversation, to shed a little light on my perspective of what's going on in this country at the moment and just my experiences as an athlete. So yeah, thanks for having me. Outstanding.
And then last and definitely not least, it's another one of our favorites, Mr. Roland Dunham. We've grown to know and appreciate Ro over the course of the past 4 years, I believe, maybe 5. I can't count, so
I think 4
for me. 4. See, I was right the first time. Go with my instinct. Ro is a very thoughtful, engaged individual that he's one of the, and boy, depending on who watches this, this may have to be edited. He's one of the guys that when he graduated, I was sad. I hated to see him go. Ro, welcome. Going to be on board with us tonight.
Sure. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited. Normally I'm shy to talk about this topic, but it feels good that we got other people who really want to know how my experience is and other people's experiences on it. So thank you for having me. No
problem. And I'll let everybody that's watching kind of know what we're going to do here. We're just going to have a conversation between 7 of us, 7 friends. We're going to talk. Hopefully there will be something that comes from it. And I will tell you, there's some of us that are going to do a whole lot less talking than others. It's time for some of us, like me, to use my 2 ears and let my one mouth shut up and just kind of figure out what people have to say. So to that end, let's go ahead and get this started. And why don't we start with, let's start, Ro, you had to wait the longest, so you're going to go first, man. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, where you've come from, and what the future holds for you, man.
Okay, so I'm from Riverbank, California. It's a town, very well, growing up, it was very small. There's a lot of Hispanics there. And just growing up, sports was the biggest thing for me and my friends. So I feel like with this topic here, sports can bring a lot of people together so one can understand one's culture, things like that. But currently I'm working at Emmanuel Medical Center. I'm a rehab aide, and I work in the hospital. So I care for people who just got off surgeries or they're on trach in the ICU. And this August I will be going to the University of Pacific to get my doctorate in physical therapy. So I'm very excited about, because it's a profession that I feel that I can give back and help a lot of people. Because my mom, I'm kind of going off a tangent, but anyways, when my mom passed away, she had a lot of back pain, and at the time she asked me what she should do for it. But I was still, I think it was my sophomore year in college, I was still new to everything. I didn't know too much about the body, and she had a lot of pain and ended up taking some drugs that she shouldn't have been, and eventually overdosed on them. And I feel like that I want to give back to people who have a lot of pain and give them another option instead of resorting to drugs, to prescription drugs, to overcome it. Because working in the hospital, I see a lot of people who come in just for pain medication. when exercise is free and it's medicine.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ro. Caprina, how about you? Where do you come from? What do we need to know about you?
Well, I come from a city called Folsom, California. It's pretty close to Sacramento up north. I'm hoping to pursue medicine. I'm going to be applying to medical school next November. And, you know, I have very similar passions, similar ideologies. Athletics is medicine, and I don't think it's used enough. I don't think that people turn to exercise as much as we should. And I know it's a bit cheesy, but like medicine is one of my first loves. My earliest experiences in life with careers has been spending times in the hospital with loved ones, and also just looking into doing it myself. So yeah, I'm also very passionate about medicine, about the body, and yeah, that's what I want to pursue forever. So
outstanding. And Wayman, you got quite this. You've been a place or two.
I have had the fortune to travel a little bit. I was a athlete in high school. Got a chance to garner a Division I scholarship. I went to the University of San Diego, and kind of some things snowballed in my direction. Well, I was able to play overseas for 9-10 years. That was my profession. It gave me an opportunity to see the world and not be in the military, live in a few different countries. So I've lived in New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, China, Kiev, Ukraine, Hong Kong. So basketball has been pretty good to me. And now I'm currently the head coach at CSU Stanislaus for women's basketball. But all of that, the secondary opportunities after basketball, or actually through basketball, were all garnered by, you know, not only being a decent athlete, but taking care of my schoolwork. I got my master's, 2 degrees from University of San Diego, and a master's from St. Mary's Moraga. And now my lifelong passion, I've gotten a beautiful opportunity to work with some wonderful young women such as Caprina, that it keeps me energized daily, and definitely always gives me a bright smile when I'm thinking of the future, because we're going to have lots of young people that are like Caprina, like Ro, like Jordan, like Reggie, continue to grow and be the leaders and the shapers of our communities to come here in the future, because these are some wonderful, talented young people. So I'm just here to support, encourage, and do some of the things that I've always done. I know probably in about 6 years I'm going to be able to say, well, you know what? I found Caprina. I caught her when she didn't know enough not to come play for me. No.
Let's open up the conversation. Let's open up the tough part of the conversation with this question. We live in the Central Valley, and primarily we're centered around the hub of Turlock. Turlock is a predominantly Caucasian community in a rural setting, relatively affluent, though there are portions of the town that are economically disadvantaged. Let's talk about your experiences in that type of a setting as African Americans.
I'll let people go first. Do you guys want to go first, or do you want me to speak towards it?
You can start.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my initial experience with coming to Turlock was this. One, there's not many opportunities where you get to be a head coach. I had already been living in the Central Valley and build a program, and you don't have to uproot and move your family somewhere. Being in the Central Valley in Turlock, it's not a hugely cultural, diverse city or town, but it's just like any metropolitan city. There's good and bad people in every city. It's just there's not that many minorities there per capita. So my experience there is I've met a lot of good people. But I have been in some awkward situations being a minority because there's just not many of us. It's like the same experience some people will have when they go to college. The numbers of minorities at any college is going to be usually primarily white because there's a cost effect to it. There's a and just by the sheer numbers, the minority population, especially of blacks, is going to be a lower percentage there. So that's just a dynamic that as you move up in anything, whether it's athletics or whatever, there's just fewer people. So that's the way I kind of have felt about it. There's great people in Turlock. Like I said, I've enjoyed it. My kids feel comfortable there. But I haven't moved to Turlock because my kids are in high school and 8th grade, and we go to church in Stockton. So I have a small commute, 40 minutes, and Stockton has a bigger African-American community. So that's kind of like my thing for why I've stayed in Stockton, and recruiting wise too, it makes it easier to cover the area that I have to cover. If I have to go to Sac Metro, I'm still home in an hour. If I go to Riverbank or Fresno, I'm home in 2 hours. Stockton's a little bit more centrally located, but Turlock is like any town USA in my mind at my age group, because once you're older and you have kids, you only go to about 7 places anyway. So Caprina and Rose's experience will be a little bit different, and Jordan's experience will be a little bit different because they're a younger demographic. They have other things that they want to do, and they have a little bit more free time. But for me, my experience has been all in all a pretty good one, and the experience that at my age demographic that I would get just about anywhere, and having lived in some Hong Kong and growing up in San Francisco, those are pretty diverse cities. So you're going to have a different cultural mix, but you're still, as a black person, you're still going to encounter some uncomfortable situations no matter what in your daily life. So that's kind of been my perspective on it.
Well, being from Riverbank, I'm a Central Valley kid, born and raised here. And Riverbank is, I think, a lot different from the other cities surrounding it. And we have a lot of Hispanics. Particularly, I'm just talking about my high school. We had a lot of Hispanics. White people and black people were the minorities at my school. And coming to Turlock, Stan States is a Hispanic serving institution, but the people in Turlock don't represent that, if you guys understand what I'm saying. But through and through, I haven't really had any problems here in Turlock. The people have been great to me anyways. I have gotten some looks here and there. My fiance is half Mexican and white, but I feel like her skin complexion makes her look more whiter than not. So we can walk in the grocery stores and we have some older Caucasian people looking at it sideways. And that, when it gets to that point, it's sort of uncomfortable, but that's very rare. But in other places around the Central Valley, I'm just telling you the truth, I'm not comfortable at all. Because you always feel like someone's watching you. Like you always feel like you have something on your back, to where you have to always be on your toes at all times. And like as a kid growing up, that's hard, honestly, because you shouldn't have to bear those weight on your shoulders. Because I was 10 years old when I first experienced my first experience of racism here in the Central Valley. It's honestly, it hurts because I'm a little kid, but I didn't look like a little kid. I looked like a 20-year-old, 21-year-old kid at 10. So it's just, you just have to grow up a little faster, you know. And I'm not sure how far up in the mountains, if the mountains like where Sonora and everything is at is a part of Central Valley, but my first experience of being called the N-word was when I was playing a game up there. I was taking the ball out of bounds. Someone just said something to the point of like, "You suck, nigger." And after the game, my head coach is like, "Wait, bro, just wait. We're gonna walk you out. We're gonna wait till everyone leaves the gym." And they all walked me out like that. And just thinking about times like that really sucks.
Yeah, I honestly, something that's I'm kind of piggybacking off of is he mentioned that in a lot of situations you have to be on your toes. So the Central Valley is super different than where I grew up. Personally, this is absolutely not the most diverse place I've ever lived, but it's much more diverse than the city I came from. Growing up, like I would get consistently, I mean, honestly, pretty much every time I was walking through a grocery store, I get followed and stuff like that, just making sure I wasn't stealing or whatever they assumed I was going to do. So I would say at a really young age. Have you guys ever heard of code switching?
Mm-hmm.
No? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
yes, Ro, you've heard of it.
Enlighten.
So
I don't know.
No idea.
yeah, let me teach you guys. So code switching is a term that means you embrace the dominant culture or like the vernacular among certain groups of people. So for example, if you're at work, you would code switch and speak slightly differently to those people than you would say you were at home with your family. So I would definitely say that in my experiences growing up and coming out here to the Central Valley, I kind of became a pro at code switching maybe when I was 7, 8 years old, being followed around stores, having stuff thrown at me out the window while I was walking home from school, sort of stuff. And I haven't had any experiences like that outright here. There's a lot of very closeted mentalities I've recognized, but overall, I would say I've had a great experience living in the Central Valley, living in Turlock. But I definitely would say a big reason that I have had such a great experience is because of my ability to blend with my surroundings pretty well, not because I've been able to just be myself.
And that's one thing that, I think that's a cultural difference that like I've explained to Brian, I've had to, well, when I was young, my parents explained to me, hey, how you have to act when you're interacting with the police, when you go into a store, you come out, when you buy something, you get a receipt. When you, like Rose said, you get used to feeling people watch you move around and how you carry yourself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it just becomes, for most minorities, it's second nature, part of what you do. And when you're explaining it to some of your white friends, they're like, well, no, the police are this way. I'll give you an experience. This happened to me this week. Now, I grew up in San Francisco, played in the PAL Police Athletic League. I've never, until last week, had a police officer driving in a car look me in the eyes and wave and smile, other than our campus police officers that I personally know. That's the first. It happened to me last week. I'm walking with my fiance and we're walking, and the police car was going in opposite direction towards us. It was in the farthest lane, and he made a concerted effort to look at both of us, make eye contact, kind of leaned across towards the passenger seat and waved and was like, hi. That had never happened to me before in my life. You know, from an officer that I did not personally flat out know really well. You know, and, you know, or explaining to my son that, you know, hey, you can't wear hoodies during the day. If it's cold, you can put a beanie on, but you're not going to walk around with a hoodie. You know, being aware of where he is, what he's doing, and how to comport himself, because I'm teaching that he's learning to drive now, how to comport himself if he is pulled over. Not, hey, what I do, you know, it's yes, officer, hands in visible sight, don't reach for anything until they tell you, both hands on the steering wheel or put them on the dashboard, make sure you fasten your seatbelt, you know, before you even stick the key in the ignition and start the car. All these different things that, you know, we have to have these talks with our children, because they're going to be judged differently just on their appearance. You know, and culturally, these are talks that Rose's parents had with him, Caprina's parents had with her, and they're conversations that their friends of different culture, parents never have. And you can see in their friends' reactions when they're pulled over. You know, Mike Shanahan, or I think it's Kyle Shanahan, the coach of the Niners, had a great interview on Monday last week, in the middle of the week, talking about how he learned early on that, you know, he's been around some of the most strong, physically imposing men, and he's seen them completely change their demeanor when law enforcement was involved, or when they had discussions about, you know, how to deal with things with the police or in different cultural situations in restaurants. And he gave one specific story. They were all 17, 18, and they got pulled over for ditching school or something. And he noticed his demeanor was totally different than his black friend, and he said, I was actually a little bit defiant. Whereas my black friend was like, hey, dude, shut up. You're going to get us hurt. You know, and it's just, those things are just different. And me having what I feel for on some of our minority, and especially our black young people now, is this is their first time being really boldly hit with this, and they're facing adversity. They don't really know how to handle it, and you feel really helpless when you feel like you don't have a voice. So I've been trying to do everything I can to talk to them, encourage them. Yes, changes can be made. It is very difficult. Life is not fair. This is an obstacle and an opportunity for us all to come together, overcome it, and try and make it better. You know, because I have friends that are my age, a little bit older, and they're very bitter. Some of them are very bitter and very cynical about it, because we've seen this play out time and time and time and time again. You know, this is not the first time for me seeing a black man unfortunately killed at the hands of police. You know, I've never done anything kind of like deviant or anything, but I've been pulled over and had to sit on the curb several times, couple times cuffed. It's uncomfortable. It's demeaning, and you're pissed off, especially when you know you've done everything up until that point the right way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and these are experiences that a lot of people have had, and our young people, this is their first time seeing this and feeling like, well, we need to take action. What can we do? Some of them are feeling helpless. Some of them are being very outspoken, eloquent, and it's hopefully going to all keep snowballing for some positive change. especially with how things are traveling on social media and how galvanized they are. So I'm very encouraged. But, like they both were saying, Turlock's been wonderful for me and my family. I've experienced little to no situations there, but there are situations everywhere we go as Blacks and minorities. Whether it was when I was going to USD, crossing the border, going to Mexico and coming back, whether it was going to the beach, wherever it was, you can always kind of get a sense of, this person's looking at me like I probably don't belong here, but I have the right to be here. And it's an uncomfortable, but it's like I call it the spider sense. You can kind of feel it, and you got to feel it, understand it, but not let it really change your demeanor, because if you do, it gives them a win.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, all three of you, real quick. Then, Wayman, you just mentioned it's always something that's kind of there but unspoken, almost like a spider sense, right? That things are just uncomfortable. Now, obviously, there are no words to describe how horrible and unfortunate the circumstance that happened recently. But the positive part of it is that it has sparked some national conversation. So now, with this at the forefront of the news every night, protesters nationwide in the streets calling for reform, opening up opportunities for conversation with even folks just like us. Does that give you a sense of what is your response to that? Is that something like, and we've seen this, we've seen this song and dance before, or we're excited about it, or what is your experience going through this particular time in our culture and in our society right now?
Well, for me personally, I feel like it's not that this most recent incident sparked the response. It's kind of a response that's been stifled by people having work that they have to go to every day, people having kids that they take care of every day, people having other things on their mind on a regular basis. And as terrible as COVID-19 has been, I think it's definitely aided in opening up this conversation, because now all you can do is watch what's going on media. Like, all you can do is pay attention. And so it kind of does feel like the same old story. But I'm super grateful. I'm so grateful that it's sparked what it has. But I honestly, I know this sounds a little, I know this doesn't sound great, but I don't think we would have had the same response had COVID-19 not put everyone at home. I think this person may have possibly been murdered the way he was, and it would have just been another story, just like every other one has been for the last who knows how long. So.
Yeah, I think this has been a long time coming. In my household anyways, and my grandmas and my sisters, this subject is something that we always talk about. And I'm just glad to see people who don't look like us speaking up for us. I went to a protest last Sunday in Modesto, and there was hardly any Black people there. It was primarily white and Hispanics, and I loved it. I just love seeing that people are sticking their neck out there and not caring about what other people will think of them because they're standing up for something like this. So, but honestly, this past week and a half has been exhausting. It's been exhausting. Like, so many people have been texting me about like how I'm doing, or even at work asking me how I'm doing. But I know it's great and all, but it's just really exhausting. And always going on TV or on Instagram or Facebook and seeing people post about this stuff and seeing people not understanding the movement is really exhausting, and it's frustrating. So, yeah.
And I take the same voice as Caprina. Initially, when the COVID-19, we had the shelter in place and the schools were out and those things. I'm really glad it kind of slowed things down because for me, I've got a freshman in high school and a 7th grader. They start to have their friends. Dad is no longer cool, and they're doing their things with their friends and Instagram and that type stuff. So I was initially happy for the slowdown to actually just spend some quality time and connect with my kids. And then I think it has snowballed to, everyone had to slow down because it's shelter in place. And, then you have the George Floyd incident. You have the lady in Central Park calling the police when in fact she was the one that was kind of causing the whole incident. You get that caught on tape. And then you have the young man get murdered in Atlanta while jogging. All those things happened in probably a 15-day span, or the releasing of the tape from the gentleman, the young man, and all those 3 things happened, boom, 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 back to back to back. And it really ignited a lot of people's fires, and hopefully we can continue the momentum and make some change. One of the things that I saw on CNN, and I pulled my kids in, they were having a protest in Berlin for rights and change in our country. And those are the beautiful things that the social media can do. But like Rose said, you've got a lot of interaction. I've been reading some documentation on how taxing Zoom meetings are, because we're all looking at each other's faces. You're worried about, not only are you taking in the sensory of how you look, but how everybody else's faces are. And they're sitting on your every word. And it's stressful, having Zoom meetings, friends calling, trying to just myself gather my own emotional feelings and be able to manage those, have talks with my family. Then you're getting calls from friends, like Rose said, and it's made me very optimistic for our future. It's kind of galvanized me to, make sure that I am a positive agent for change and engagement in these tough conversations with the Caprinas, with the Rose, with the Bryans and the Erics and the Georges, everyone I know, because a lot of people feel uncomfortable with this conversation of race relations in our country, because it's just, there's different stressors between lighter and dark-skinned Blacks. There's different stressors between Blacks that are educated and those that are working class. There's Caprina says she grew up in Folsom, and then coming to be to Stanislaus and being in athletics, that's a more even tighter group of Black students. And she's coming from Folsom, where there was really not that many Black students. So, there's all these different demographics in play, and, all the different communications are stressors for all of us, whether we're talking to our kids or our aunts and uncles that are older than us, our peers, counterparts, some people older, some people younger. So hopefully we can all just keep having these conversations. And, because when I lived in China, I was the minority, and you had a sense that it's their country. When I was in Japan, there's kind of Japanese only areas of town. So I've just had the fortunate blessing of being afforded the opportunity to kind of live all over the world. So I have a different perspective and maybe even a little bit more patience, and just because I'm older. You know, I know when I was Kaprina's age, I wasn't close to as smart as she was, and definitely thought I knew everything. And now I look back now, because this doesn't count for Kaprina, but now I look back and I'm like, I was kind of dumb when I was, 22, 23, 24. So as you get older, your perspective is going to change, and some of us become more bitter. Some of us, you just get different perspectives. And I just really hope that, I'm eternally hopeful and want things to get better over the course of my life. And I want to keep our young people energized and believing that they can change the narrative and our world for the better. And hopefully we all can be moving in that direction. And it starts with some of these uncomfortable conversations. Kaprina's great at doing it, let me tell you. She's going to be a world beater, let me tell you.
We're gonna be able to say that we knew her back when.
We knew her. Wayman, I just want to let you know that at 58, I feel as dumb as a rock. So, I'm going the wrong direction. I know it all now. I'm just dumb. Brian, I think you had something to talk about.
Well, I think I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Wayman and Kaprina and Ro talked about with the COVID thing, and the fact that it has been, for all of us, a high level of frustration. But in the same way, it's in a way been a little bit of a gift, because for the first time in our lives, and probably for the 4 younger ones, really the first time in your life that you feel like the world has slowed down, not sped up. And it has allowed all of us an opportunity to reevaluate, look at how we live our lives. And I think you're right. Had we been doing the same old, I wonder if and again, I'm going to just jump onto the sports vernacular here a little bit. If the NBA finals were going on, and the Stanley Cup finals, and baseball was going on, would we really have would we really have taken the time to sit down and do this? And I just love your perspective. I know you guys kind of talk about it. So that's kind of the first part. The second part is, and we talk sports and so forth, and I don't want to get too much into the sports side, but in your experiences, in what ways has sports helped and hindered you having these types of conversations, whether that be with coaches, teammates, parents, officials, in your life? Has it helped or hindered, or are there pros and cons to both sides?
Well, in my experience, I would definitely say that athletics has almost been like a refuge. I've had tons of teammates that I always thought I could go to in any moment. And it's always been, it's like in moments of grief or in moments of frustration, athletics was always an amazing way to like get out and to let that go. I don't think we have the race conversation enough, just simply because it's something we're taught not to talk about. You don't talk about religion or politics. And despite never being able to change what you look like, it's still considered something political. So I definitely think that if we could cater more to an environment that allows that type of open conversation. But overall, my experience with athletics has been amazing. I mean, I have so many people that I now know, I can go to or talk to throughout my whole entire experience. So.
Yeah, athletics has been a refuge for me too. Because most of my teams have always been diverse. Actually, it wasn't until I got to college where I had a lot of Black teammates. Mm-hmm. But because growing up, it's probably primarily Hispanics and whites. But other than that, I think athletics has been good. And also for parents who don't really interact with people from other cultures, athletics helps as well, because sports are a diversity. There's diversity in a lot of sports, so I think that it's helped. I don't think it's a hindrance at all, to be honest.
Well, me being on this podcast, I owe it all to to athletics. Well, I'll give it a combination of education and athletics. I think all of you guys have heard me say this several times. And my grandfather told me this: the better your education, the better your vacation. So me being put in athletics as a youth, I think my parents put me in it to one, burn some energy so I would go to sleep. But like we all, when you put your children in athletics to kind of teach them some lifelong lessons, to get outside their comfort zone, to learn to interact with others, to work in small groups, to build a work ethic and some determination. And those are the things that, if you apply them to your academic life, they'll get you through some classes, through, study groups, learning to work with people. Okay, well, Timmy's got a better jump shot than me. Let me talk to him and see if that can help me, such and such. Why are they such a good pitcher? Oh, it's how they're gripping the ball. And you learn different things from different people, and you take different skills and develop different tools, and you put them in your toolbox so that you can use them later when they're needed. And I think athletics, for that, gives you a chance to come into interaction with a lot of different people. And if you're a good teammate and you've been on some good teams, bigger teams, smaller teams, it teaches you to have conversations with people. It teaches you to learn how to get along with Timmy or Susan because you want to win, even though they're a jerk. It teaches you some life skills. And I've been fortunate enough to kind of continue to be a lifelong learner through athletics, because I get to coach women's basketball and be in the kinesiology department at Stanislaus. So I go out, I recruit players, I meet their parents. I try to get really good student athletes, well-rounded people that are very patient, because they got to be around me once they get to Stanislaus. So I think sports, especially for me, is kind of really been a blessing for me in my life. It's brought some really good people into my life. It's given me the opportunity to share some of my knowledge and learn some things from people older than me and younger than me. And as we all strive to better ourselves, if we start to take the objective where I don't have to be right, I want us to get it right and to have better communication, then, that's something that I've learned through sports. Katrina's smiling because she's heard me say that.
I think she was about ready to she was going to give us a lesson that takes
time to learn, that's for sure.
Yeah. Katrina helped me learn that. She was like, if you say it like this, you don't talk as long, we'll probably still understand.
As we have a discussion about race relations and racism, I think let's be a little bit blunt for a second. There's all different kinds of racism. There's that overt racism, you suck, right? There's that covert racism, the fact you walk through the grocery store and feel that target on your back, right? There's institutional racism, and there's systemic racism. What is it that we should, or what is it that drives you most that we should eradicate? I mean, it's a terrible question. It's a hard question to ask. But all of those forms of racism are different and painful, I would guess. What would you like to see addressed?
Well, I think the first thing that happens that we have to do is everybody needs to address some shortfallings that happen in our history. Things aren't covered. Like the history of policing. Policing started as, overseers with the slaves. The history of, the economic divide. When the slaves were initially freed, they weren't really given anything. And at that time, the land out west was being given away to immigrant farmers. You could stake a claim and do those things, but there was no land being given to Black people. So, but that's not really covered, and people might want to debate that. So slaves were basically freed into kind of starvation and economic poverty, and it wasn't on equal ground. So you gotta cover those things and have those hard conversations, because it's just truths. With redlining, as far as with loans and other economic things, or business loans and just whatever, and renting and actually ownership in certain areas for property. Those things have happened in the past. They still happen, and you just got to call it out for what it is. And it's just, the first part of those conversations. And then on our part, as culturally different, we have to understand that sometimes our cultural things that we have, whether we're Black, Hispanic, Cambodian, Filipino, we have some cultural things inherently that we do that outside of our culture, they're foreign. So when seen through somebody else's lenses, they may be taken aback a little bit. Black people kind of get excited and our voices might get higher. We're not necessarily mad, but it could take someone aback that's not been privy and part of our culture for a while. It's just more acceptance on everyone's behalf of the differences, recognize there's differences and things that have happened in the past, and talk about them and be honest and upfront. Because it's like, if someone's telling you their perception, it's what they see in their perception, and that's their reality. Now, it may not be what you were trying to have them receive in your messaging or how you were looking. It's like, my son thinks he looks great in a hoodie. But, if he's walking down the street, at this time, the sun is starting to go down and he's a good sized Black young man. Now that could be kind of intimidating to a 65-year-old white lady walking her little poodle right now, and it's just her perception, and he just thinks he looks good in the Nike gear. It's just, you have to be willing to concede and accept that some people look at life through a different lens, and then have those conversations about, okay, well, no, this is not, what really was going on. This is what I meant to put out there. Oh, I understand how it could be perceived by you this way.
I kind of, honestly, to piggyback off of that, I think the whole idea of changing your perspective on the way other people see the world. There's comments I hear sometimes like, I don't see color and things like that. It definitely, I have a habit, it definitely makes me feel dismissed sometimes. I feel like by not seeing color, you are denying my racial and ethnic existence and experiences as a woman of color, as a Black woman of color. So to just see the world through only your lens and to not recognize the differences in experience based on the color is to, in a sense, dismiss the experiences that person has had. So I think one of the big differences that I would want to see is pretty similar to what Wayman was saying. I would want to see people to be more open, to recognize that there are differences, and to not dismiss those differences as just skin tone, but rather as something that someone has to experience the rest of their whole life.
And for me, I would love to see like just a change, because Wayman was talking about the history of where Black people come from. I would just love to see a better job of it being taught in the school system, and also with other cultures, because honestly, we don't really talk too much about other cultures going through the K through 12 school system. And I know there's a lot of different levels to different school districts, but I think that should be addressed as well, because I didn't really know anything about like the Japanese and stuff, what they went through during World War II, until I got to college. And a lot of people don't even go to college. So if you don't address that earlier, it'll just take longer for people to understand the different cultures that we have here in this country.
And it's a natural thing, because no one wants to go back and talk about their faults, and things where things were dramatically wrong. Like when you think about, back in high school, you don't talk about, well, man, I used to rock a Jerry curl or blah, blah, blah. You talk about something else that you feel I didn't have a Jerry curl, but it's when you tell the story of yourself, you're trying to tell the best story, and I think a lot of times when you look at the history of our country, our country is probably the best country in the world. People send their best and brightest to come to our universities. There's people swimming across oceans on floats and rafts and trying to get across our borders from Mexico, coming all the way from South America, to get here, because our country affords you the opportunity. If you work hard and you are diligent and you manage your time and resources, you can have a pretty good life in America. And I can say that because I've lived in a few different countries, and I had the opportunity when I stopped playing basketball to maybe live in 2 or 3. I would rather be here than anywhere else. But on the other end of that spectrum, we have some things that are sad that take place in this world and take place in this country. Slavery was a huge part of how this country was built. Also, people immigrating to this country was huge. We've got to continue to embrace that. And no one's life is perfect. No individual is perfect. And our country is far from perfect. So when we're covering stuff in our history books, it's very easy to gloss over slavery, how the Indians were slaughtered, their land was taken, how their community's been decimated economically, and their tremendous lack of resources. California, Mexican Americans have had a huge impact on this country, especially in California, on the agriculture and development on the business side and everything else. But no one talks about the immigrant workers that come in seasonally, and those things, because they're shameful. People coming to this country working for less than minimum wage and being taken advantage of because they don't have, they have alien status for a time. Those things are shameful. They take place in our wonderful country, but they're not talked about and highlighted because it's embarrassing. It's like that drunk uncle that comes to the reunion. No one really talks about Uncle Ray, but he got the same last name as you.
As we start to wind this down, Jordan, you've been awfully quiet over there.
Yeah, no. I wanted to pose a question, mainly for Coach Strickland, but also, for Ro and Caprina as athletes. As a coach, and talking, to Ro and talking to a bunch of my friends about this topic, I've been trying to, find a way, like, what is my impact? What is my change? How can I help? Because growing up, I've had mostly African-American friends playing basketball, and then now coaching, trying to mentor, like most African-American team. And for the most part, what I feel like my impact, my change I can have on the team is that, pushing them academically so then they change their course in their family, if that makes sense. Pushing graduation onto them and even giving them the extra nudge, saying like do this for not only for you, but for your family and changing that in the future. And then also, as a man that is going to have my own family one day, just treating my kids and teaching them the correct values and things like that. But I guess the question would be for you, Coach Strickland, what are ways, that can we use coaching to help this problem, or, to put it in our team culture or things like that. And then for Caprina and Ro, as being student athletes, former student athletes, that you would like to see maybe, to talk about these issues, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't you start, Ro, and then Caprina, and then I'll go.
Okay, well, my experience being, how it is being a stand, some people, like playing on the basketball team, everyone just wants to go pro. You know that, right, Jordan?
Yep.
And I feel like some people, there's definitely some people who can do it, but the reality is a lot of people won't make it. And I feel like some people, we should start pushing the idea of using all the resources at STAN, like getting involved with the honors program or the McNair Scholars program, and reaching out for internships and things like that can help you after you graduate to build your resume up instead of only building it up for basketball. So, yeah.
I would definitely say some of the fixes that I would want would be on a bigger scale, like complete NCAA fixes. Like, one of the things I think should be mandatory for all coaches and athletes is some sort of diversity training. Because I think, in college athletics, you're surrounded by a diverse field of people, and some people never are exposed to that growing up. And I think that some sort of diversity training, or maybe conversations like this, would be super helpful. Something that we could actually enforce and could make change. And then the other thing I could think of on a smaller scale would be like a diverse student council with monthly meetings, and also including like the heads of faculty, just so that we can continue to maintain a healthy conversation about the subject.
What I would say is be great where you are and make sure you're knowledgeable and having good open dialogue and relationships. The more you know about a person, and the better your conversations can be. You got to know their background. I'm glad Caprina's here. I grew up with Caprina's mother. Her aunts and uncles grew up 4 houses down the street from me. So, me being an only child, for survival purposes, I was an honorary Hale. So
yeah, there were 13 of them.
So I knew pretty much how Caprina was going to be because I knew her family. I got a chance to watch her play a few times, and as she grew more comfortable with our relationship, she could be more honest and curt and open herself up and passionately tell me exactly what was on her mind. And we had a type of relationship to where she could be like, Coach, you're wrong. You know, and here's why I think you were wrong. And she felt comfortable enough to tell me, and I would listen. And I actually changed some things just because, you know, again, I say a lot, I don't necessarily have to be right. I want to get it right. And I was like, well, you know what? I say that too damn much not to try it this way, because I just wanted to make sure that I had good relationships and was trying to be great in whatever role it was, whether it was counseling, whether it was mentoring, whether it was talking, whether it was motivating, whether it was just being an active listener. And for me, the hardest part, just shutting up and listening. So if you want to be and have an effect, and I would tell this to anyone, if you want to have an effect on any situation, whether it's your team culture, whether it's this cultural divide we have in this country, be great in each moment that you're in. So if you see someone that, you know, you kind of get that feeling, oh, this situation is not right, speak up and say something about it. If you are in a situation where you feel maybe you want to check on a friend because something has happened, you might feel a little uneasy about calling them, but that's your friend. That's your relationship. Be great in it. Call them. Be that great friend. Be that great person that was just walking by. Be that good Samaritan, whatever it is, and speak up, because there's all been situations where we've seen something happen and we didn't say anything. Hopefully, this will galvanize all of us to be great people in whatever situation we are in. You know, and for me, what I'm dealing with my basketball team, because I'm dealing with young women, and I know for a fact, I think totally different than them. There's times where, you know, I have to lean out or lean in or just ask them, hey, what do you think? It's not a trick question. I just want to know. This is what I'm trying to get you to do. This is what I see. This is what I would hope you would see. And if you don't see it, just trust me. But what do you see? You know, we have to have those conversations. Like you guys are asking, well, how do you feel when you walk in a store? How do you feel? You guys are super comfortable in Turlock. Now, if you came with me to where I grew up in San Francisco and I just let you stroll around, you probably might not feel as comfortable, because there'll be less familiar faces. There'll be very few white people. You see maybe one or two Asian people walking through, but the neighborhood's predominantly black. If we went to, you know, it's like if we dropped you guys off in Compton, you would automatically feel uncomfortable, because you're like, whoa, they're getting ready to drop me off in Compton and meet me on the other side. And then you'd have to walk through that area. It's a totally different experience when you just think about it like that. So that's how Turlock kind of is for us. We know it's not a bad community. It's just like when you first go away to college, you know you're going to a college, but it's a totally different community than you've been in for the last 17, 18 years growing up. You know, so if we all just learn to kind of open up, be great where we are, and try to be accepting of what other people tell us they see and how they feel, I think that would go a long way.
Eric, I think we're getting down the last few moments here. I know each of us have one final question, and I'll start. How do we maintain this positive momentum going forward to bring about the necessary restoration required to begin the process of healing and not allow this to become another blip on the radar and then nothing happens and we revisit it again when the next terrible thing happens? How do we make this situation different than the rest?
You want to go, Caprina? You're the most thoughtful.
I think I'm thoughtful because I need a second to think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll buy you guys some time. I think one thing we have to do is both sides have to be diligent. Both sides have to be patient, but continue working. I think, and we have to make sure that we don't allow other narratives to pole vault the race relations to become a higher priority. We've got to make sure that our focus stays. There's lots of things, but I think this is the first big problem that we need to tackle, and we need to understand that it's not going to be fixed just by an election in November and then everybody calm down. It's not going to change by, the city council board in Minneapolis saying, well, yeah, we've got 9 people that are going to vote to defund the police department with no plan. That's silly. I think the way we police will need to be revisited, and trainings need to be done. Some simple things like body cams shouldn't be able to be turned off. There's some simple fixes, basic things that we need to cover and continue to keep checking the list and revisit from time to time. How do we think we're going here? Do we need to make more changes there? And we can't allow the election that's going to come up in November to supersede, that we still have huge economic inequalities and there's still racism. We probably need to tackle how the electoral colleges is dealt with the election. Every state has 2 senators. How are we going to do it by population? How, different voting boundaries have been moved and things. There's a lot of little problems and big problems that need to be addressed, but we need to keep the focus on doing each little thing right and just continue working. And that's going to take a lot of energy and focus and communication from minorities and all our citizens, from our wealthy and our poor and our middle class. Everybody's got to understand that we're not going to be able to fix everything all at once, but we need to concentrate on having short-term attainable goals, but not settle after 1 or 2 things are fixed.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead.
Okay. But I actually, you were saying we can't fix everything at once, and that reminded me of something. We can only affect our sphere of influence. So, if you have, it's one thing, you can talk to your friends and you can talk to your family about these issues and create awareness. But I mean, it's not a guarantee that the random person down the street you're talking to is going to agree with your views or even be willing to listen to what you have to say. So I think the first step to maintaining change is to change your personal sphere of influence. And then on top of that, each generation has the power to move us forward in racial equality. It can't happen with just one of us or a couple of us or even a group of us. It's going to have to be all of us working together against these inequalities. So something that we should remember, all of us, just as human beings, is just because it's not a stereotype that necessarily affects us as the way we identify, it doesn't mean that it's our problem. So just remember that despite the perspective that you're sitting in, you need to be able to recognize that other people are experiencing problems, and you also need to educate your sphere of influence.
I agree with that sphere of influence. But I just think that more people should continue the dialogue that we're currently speaking on right now. And just like if you're sitting at Starbucks or somewhere and you have some time and there's someone sitting by themselves, maybe you should just say hello and maybe that could spark a conversation that you might have never had, and you might find out something about someone from another culture that you've never known before. And then we need to just unify more, because we have, politics is a big deal in this country, but we're all America. It's the political divide is, for me anyways, it's the biggest it's been since I've been alive anyway. Oh, we just all need to unify and try to get back to, maybe we're not even where we used to be. I don't know, but I just think we need to unify.
Absolutely. Very well said, guys. I think is what I want to give you guys a chance to leave us with something to think about. So from where you sit, from what you experience, from how you have to live, tell me the one thing that you would want us to hear, or the one thing you'd want us to learn, or the one thing you want us to take away from a discussion about race and race relations. One thing.
Well, I want you guys just to know that I'm not a criminal, because I might not look like a nice guy on your first impression of me, but once I open up my mouth, I feel like people tend to like me. So yeah.
I saw something that had inspired me, but as a collegiate runner for the last 5 years, I learned a big lesson, and it's when you're running, when you're sprinting, once you reach top speed, you can't go any faster than your body's terminal velocity, right? So the people who win the race aren't the ones who are continuously accelerating all the way through the finish line. They're the ones who get into the correct position and are able to maintain top speed without wearing down. And I think for making change, we need to be able to do the same thing. To advocate for change, it's about maintaining your speed by staying consistent, by not forgetting the things that those around us experience.
I would say, well, I got to use 2 words: quality relationships. If we all strive to have quality relationships, then we'll all listen better. We'll all be more thoughtful before we speak. We'll all be more accepting of one another, because if you want to have a quality relationship, at some point, everyone in the relationship is compromising for the betterment, not of the other person, but of the relationship. So I hope we all strive as Americans, or just as human beings, to have quality relationships. If we have quality relationships with one another, we'll be willing to say, well, you know what? Maybe you're right, and let me revisit what I was saying, or how we handled that situation, so that the next time it occurs, we handle it better together. And then I think everybody will be a lot happier with how we continue to progress, because everyone will feel like they're being heard, actively listened to, loved, and cared for, and be a better environment and a better world for all of us.
Oh, very well said, Wayman. I appreciate that, man. And I got to tell you, this has been it's been great for me to sit and just talk with y'all. Just the 7 of us as friends and partners in this whole deal. I want you to know something from me personally. I can't speak for anybody else. I can just speak for me. And for me, I want to apologize for my lack of action, for my lack of concern, and my lack of compassion for what you guys have to deal with. Not going to be that way anymore. To do what I can. Don't know what it is, but we're going to try to do what we can. to be a part of a solution, to be a part of a reconciliation, to be a part of something that moves us to a different place than where we are today. Because to paraphrase Larry Fitzgerald, where we are in this country right now, we're not healthy. We're not okay. We need to get to where we're okay. And I'm going to take a lot from you guys. Learned a lot, heard a lot to think about. And I just want to say I appreciate you guys being a part of this podcast. Now, at the end of every podcast, we make it a point. We just get kind of goofy, and we say, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, get in the game. Never been more important to say that than right now. Who you are, no matter what you're doing, get in the game. Be a part of the solution. I want to thank you all for listening, and hopefully this was worth your time. I know it was worth mine. Thank you, guys. Good night, everybody.
You've been listening to Get in the Game, an exclusive presentation of the Blue Chip Sports Network. Get in the Game with Eric, Brian, Reggie, and Jordan on iTunes, the Blue Chip Broadcasting YouTube channel, and BlueChipBroadcasting.com.